So I'm here to talk about my unique career mainly as a scientist and a psychic and a medium. This is my full-time job now. I'm a spiritual practitioner. Let me start my presentation. Okay, if I can just ask for the presentation to be on the slides. Beautiful. Thank you. So that's the topic of my talk, Unveiling the Truth, How Science and Spirituality Can Coexist. Just a little bit about me. I grew up in Melbourne. I lived in Sydney with my husband for about 12 years. I will be talking about myself and my experience in the spiritual realm. So I grew up in quite a dysfunctional family environment. You can see my parents up the top, my cousins down the bottom, and now I'm happily married, so that's my husband on the left with me. I won People's Choice last year, so if anyone voted for me, thank you. So I'm also an animal communicator and a pet sitter. I'm currently pet sitting in Bondi, 2 cats. The cats seem to like me. They don't like each other, but they seem to like me. I've always been able to communicate with animals. I was psychic as a child. I sort of was a bit of a grim reaper because I had childhood tact with the news I delivered. It was very frustrating for me as a child because I thought adults were stupid. They didn't know things. They didn't trust their intuition, not realising that I believe everyone is psychic, but not everyone was. It was a particular psychic child. I was very psychic. I was aware of my mediumship when I was about 9 or 10. Are you aware of the difference between a psychic and a medium? Okay, I'm seeing some nods and shakes. All right, a psychic is someone who connects with the energy of the person in front of them, whether it's in an audience or the person sitting in front. And it's using all your clairs, so you see, hear, feel, smell, taste, you have a knowing. You're reading the energy of the person in front of you. So that could be seeing auras, it could be smelling things, just having a knowing. Mediumship is connecting with spirit. So you often see dead people or you hear dead people. It's using the same senses, but you're connecting with spirit and you're relaying that message to the person in front. So that's evidence of survival of the soul. So there's a difference between psychic and medium, and I do both. I was a medical scientist for about 20 years. I specialised in sleep medicine with a bit of respiratory medicine as well. These are my qualifications. So this is where I've studied. Science degree, I got an industry-based scholarship for a graduate certificate. A law degree, graduate diploma legal practice, and RPSGT is Registered Polysomnographic Technicians, which is a qualification from the US for sleep scientists. It's quite big over in the US. It's not as formal here in Australia. It's sort of... They're looking at getting an Australian qualification. This is where I've worked, mostly in hospitals. This is where I've worked in my scientific practice. So I've worked in the UK, the NHS. I've worked in public and private facilities in Australia. I've worked in adult and paediatric sleep, diagnosing and treating a range of sleep disorders. What I do now, I do readings, obviously. I host psychic fairs and cruises under my other brand of Ocean Wings. My brand as a spiritual practitioner is Rhonda Kelly's readings. I do a combination of things. I also have been on radio, I've been on psychic TV, I've written articles in magazines, I've almost finished my book and that will be coming out shortly. I've written some ebooks as well on sleep and other things. And this is me as a legal practitioner. Just giving you a range of what I've actually done. So I've been involved in community legal education. I've mostly worked in community law, community legal centres. I've done duty in other places, like prisons and courts, just giving an idea of some common legal problems. The ice block there is just showing you that your life problem is the bit of ice on top, but it can often be much more complicated. It can cover more than one area of law, and the ice underneath is what could be below the surface. So with a legal issue, there's limitation periods, there's time periods, so it's important to get legal help fast. You can do as much work as you can by yourself to keep the costs down, but you can also, get some advice early. So that's my legal career. Top picture's my admission. I've practiced in Victoria and New South Wales. I currently have a New South Wales practicing certificate. This is then my scientific career. So the right is my list of jobs list of duties I've done. So the bottom picture is just a multimeter, so looking at technical quality control, that sort of thing that I've done. And I've also just written common sleep disorders. Now that I look at that, some of those aren't that common. Narcolepsy is 1 in 2,000. But we all probably know what it's like when we don't sleep well, how important sleep is. So it's not completely separate, but it's important. You know, we sleep for so much of our life, and you don't realise there's a problem until you feel unwell or you feel tired or you're not functioning. And I've seen very mild cases and very extreme cases of that. But sleep medicine is interesting. Sleep and psychic are quite interesting. If you tell people you're a sleep scientist or you're a psychic, people want to ask about their sleep problems or their life problems. So there's a commonality there. This is an example of what I did in sleep medicine. This is a photo of my friend Phil, who's passed. I have permission from his wife to use this photo. He was wired up for a sleep study. What you can see there are electrodes on his head measuring EEG, a few ground and reference electrodes. We also look at muscle activity on the chin and legs. Also have a couple of respiratory bands looking at respiratory effort, because that helps us identify if there's any sleep disorder breathing, whether it's obstructive or whether there's something else going on. The picture on the right is a sleep hypnogram. The left-hand side of that are the EEG, the brainwaves that are found. Basically, when we sleep, we go through cycles, and I am talking about altered states of consciousness later, so this is an introduction to that. The hypnogram shows that we, for example, dream every 90 minutes, and we only dream for a short period of time. The blue down the bottom is your deep sleep, your slow wave sleep, so that's important. Each stage of sleep is important physiologically. There's a lot of research and there's still debate on exactly what happens during what stage. But basically, the more awake we are, the faster and lower amplitude our brainwaves are, and the deeper the sleep we are in, the bigger and slower our brainwaves are. So that's what you're seeing. You're seeing wake, stage 1, the lighter stage of sleep, and then stage 2, you've got spindles and K complexes, a couple of identifying factors, and then you've got the slow wave sleep. So that's, have you heard of REM sleep? So that's when we're believed to be dreaming, rapid eye movement sleep, and that's associated with changes in sight. We see things, we smell things, we hear things, we taste things. So again, those clairs I was talking about. So that's basically a hypnogram of normal sleep. A lot of people don't have normal sleep. When there's for example, a sleep disorder and then there's treatment for that sleep disorder, there's a sleep disorder breathing, you have, for example, REM rebound, so that dream sleep and the red in the middle. You might see someone dream for an hour or an hour and a half. I think the longest I saw was nearly 2 hours. It's their body's way of catching up. Does anyone know what would happen to us if we didn't sleep, if we deprived ourselves of sleep? What would the effect be? Yeah? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yes, absolutely, hallucinate. You'd actually die of septic shock, because sleep is important for physiological processes. We have digestion, we have a lot of things going on in our non-REM sleep. In our REM sleep, we have memory consolidation. Basically, from stage 2, we go into REM sleep. The best way I've heard it described, I think it was a guy in Iceland at a conference, said that non-REM sleep is like a pigeonhole. Non-REM 2 sleep is like a pigeonhole. Your brain can either go into deep sleep for restoration, digestion, growth, hormonal, cell repair, or it can go into REM sleep for memory consolidation. So throwing out short-term memory, laying the foundation of long-term memory. So that's an interesting way of putting it. So basically, when we're asleep, we have blood supply to our head that could be greater than when we're awake. And we have physiological processes. So although sleep, people think we're unconscious, we're actually very active. Our body, it's essential for our body. And if we didn't sleep, it would be fatal. And there's also a distinction between if we deprived ourselves just of REM sleep. They've done studies, probably couldn't get ethics now, but they did studies on cats and mammals where they had them on a little board in water, and every time they went into, had wired it up the EEG, every time they went into REM, they dipped them in water, so woke them up. And they actually went psychotic. So not having REM sleep is really bad for us mentally. But sleep overall is important physiologically as well. Okay, so my other careers have obviously impacted my spiritual practice. I believe I have good spiritual practice. I ensure that every client coming to me for a reading or doing a course or teaching is doing so voluntary. I don't force people to have readings. So I think of the clinical and research and legal practice rules. I think of the ethics of that. If someone's in a bit of doubt, often I get people that have a reading at a spiritual fair and then they want their friends to have a reading, and their friends come and they say, I want to, but I've got to pay the rent, so I refuse to do the reading. And I tell them to look at my YouTube channel or something like that. So certainly they have shaped my spiritual business. And I also, although I'm a psychic and a medium, I have a healthy degree of scepticism. I don't spend thousands of dollars doing courses. I probably spend a lot of money on books and read a lot. I'm still a bit of a nerd. But, if someone says I'm 10th generation psychic medium, I say, well, where did your grandparents live? Where did your great-grandparents live? What language did they speak? If they can't confirm that, they can't confirm the lineage. Often, being a psychic and a medium, it's in our family. It is passed down, and I'll get to that a little bit later. All right, so my talk is obviously about science and spirituality. The key to this talk is for you to make your own inquiries and have a think about things for yourself. So you're welcome to believe what I say or not, that's fine. I have broad shoulders and won't be offended. But I want you to go away and think about things. So for me, science is the understanding of the physical, biological, chemical, the natural world. It's continuous expansion of knowledge. Theories are proven and disproven, then there's the next research topic. It's really quite funny when you look at PubMed or you look at some of the scientific papers, the title of the paper often sounds ridiculous. This was disproven. It's very sort of formal and rigid in the language, but I get what they're doing. They're making it continuous learning, proving and disproving things. Think of, a child that's crawling and learns to walk. They stop developing in crawling, but they continue developing walking. It's kind of like the next stage. And certainly, I did my science degree, 30 years ago, and there's so much has changed. I did biochemistry and molecular genetics, even just cell membranes. It's all completely different. And I didn't realise I decided to start tutoring again, and she was studying pharmacology, and it was all completely different. I read the textbook and I thought, I don't know that. So, but not tutor. But it's always changing. So it's a continuous discovery and inquiry. Now poses the question of what is spirituality. I'm also Executive Secretary of the Australian Spiritual Alliance. It's spiritual.org.au. That's just the logo there. And editor of the Spiritual Voice magazine. So spirituality has a different definition for different people. Some people define it as with a religious connotation. There's no right or wrong. It's just your faith-based belief system. It's really, I've written my thoughts there. You can take them or leave it, but I want you to go away and have a think about that yourself, what spirituality means to you. So for me, I really like to leave the world in a better place. Even if it's just house sitting, I like to leave the pets calm. I often give Reiki to pets. It's continuous discovery of things and continuous learning. I'm a Sagittarius, so that helps with my my desire to learn. It's really being authentic and not taking things personally as well. That's easier said than done sometimes, but sometimes I have to ground myself and anchor myself to do that. So in terms of good spiritual practice, these are my thoughts on that. So as I've mentioned before, with my doing readings, the power lies with the sitter. A reading has to be voluntary. They have free will, and I like to educate and empower them. A good psychic will answer your question basically and advise you of what they're getting, but they'll also help you communicate with your own spirit guides. So ideally you wouldn't need a psychic because you're able to listen to the signs and synchronicities and understand them. It's one thing noticing things, but sometimes you don't understand them. You see repeating numbers or whatever that is. I've just touched on religion and science. That's not the basis of this talk, but just I thought that's probably what's going to come up. I had an interesting upbringing as a child. I was brought up Christian. I went to Sunday school, but Sunday school for me was about the food and the people. I didn't really think about the religion. I actually had each grandparent was a different religion, so we weren't brought up with a strong religious faith. So that's just a little caveat on my sort of take of that. Basically, faith is important. If faith makes you a better person, that's great. If faith makes you fearful and judgmental and, you know, I call them the God Squad. Sometimes at psychic fairs, I have people come up to me and say, you're doing the devil's work. And it's a fine line between whether I educate them or they're just so fixed. You know, faith is important, but if you're going to be limited or fearful, then it's not important. As I said, a healthy degree of scepticism is good. It's interesting looking at some of the changes in Australia with the census data. There's now a space to write your religion, so you could write that you're spiritual. So it's sort of it's classified as a broad category. So there's a change in energy with that. And it used to actually be illegal it used to be a summary offence to do psychic readings. And there's been some cases where people have been arrested. So Australia's a bit lagging behind, for example, in the UK or other countries, but, you know, we're getting better. So that's really interesting that things have changed. And I want everyone to have a healthy degree of scepticism. You know, not be gullible and believe every word, but actually think about it for themselves and be able to connect with their own spirit guides. Okay, my clicker's frozen. There we go. All right, so just comparing science and spirituality. Think of a ball rolling down a hill. You have the force of gravity, acceleration due to the force of gravity. Everything goes to a more stable position. That's the most basic way I can describe science. And in terms of spirituality, we're the most anchored or grounded when we're stable. So when we're trusting our intuition, our thoughts are clear, we're not overthinking it. So we're basically, that's our ideal position. And when we are grounded, our vibration rises. So in our ability to connect with our loved ones in spirit or connect with our spirit guides. So it's different. So it's a lower energy state, a more grounded state. And, you know, people will talk about taking your shoes off in the park or going for a walk on the beach. You can do that. I'm really fortunate. I can just switch off. I could, you know, if I went back to working shift work, I could sleep. I could just switch off and I can ground myself. You can meditate, you can journal, you can do all sorts of things. Sometimes I meditate and I get amazing clairvoyance, amazing insight. Sometimes I meditate and I think of food and then I don't. So don't be too hard on yourself. You can be good at it or better at it the next day. The most basic thing I do is when I have a shower in the morning, I imagine that the water is white light and that's unconditional love. So that's unconditional love is washing over me and it's washing away all the crap, anything not aligned to unconditional love. So anything you're saying to yourself, anything you've heard people say, you wash that away. These are just a few examples of keeping a stable position in the scientific world. So we've got obviously homeostasis for plants and animals, evolution, talked about sleep. Even, you know, if there's a chemical reaction, the electrons might be excited, there might be an explosion, something fast or something slow, but then the outer shell electrons will go back to, outer shell electrons will go back to the more stable position. Even in aviation, it's the autopilot is constantly adjusting the forces. And matter doesn't disappear. You know, matter doesn't go anywhere, so it's going to the most stable position. just touching on evolution, I studied evolution quite a lot, evolution, neurobiology, neuroscience. Just again, throwing in the religious question, is God the creator of evolution? I believe yes, but I also believe it can be explained with science. There's comparative anatomy of fossils and embryology. Of just the bottom slide there is just a comparison of vertebrate embryology. You can see the similarity. The top is a classification, a taxonomy classification. So we've got kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus and species. Particularly evolution and differences in evolution are around the class and order type thing. And what fascinates me about evolution is particularly plants in South Africa and Australia. Similar latitude. They are completely different species, so completely different on a top taxonomy scale, yet they've evolved to be similar. So again, being in that lower energy state, and evolution takes a very long time, but they've evolved to be stable in that not needing the energy to get food and nutrients and, you know, the xylem and phloem, the arteries and veins in plants, they've evolved to adapt and survive, basically. So I find that fascinating. All right, I'm just touching on soul and spirit now. You probably have your own beliefs of what soul and spirit are. It's interesting, before I did this talk, I reached out to four other readers that I respect, and I got a different answer of what a soul and a spirit is. And I've read conflicting things myself. My belief is that the spirit is the connection to the divine, so when we connect to our higher good. But I also believe in soulmates, soul groups, reincarnation. Your soul comes back to learn different lessons. And when I do mediumship, it's evidence of survival of the soul. So take it or leave it with what I've written. Please investigate yourself and form your own opinions. But it's just interesting that people who work in this industry are so different in what they think. And some people are very convinced of this is how it is. And, you know, we could die tomorrow and find out we're wrong. So it's not, there's an element of trust, there's an element of scepticism, but it's important to make the inquiries yourself and think about what you think. So the soul, I believe, is everything that makes us alive. It's interesting looking at the soul function and brain function is, you know, when there's decisions or when there's psychic readings, is that coming from the brain or is that coming from our intuition? There have been some really interesting neurological studies where people have had lesions or parts of the brain missing, yet they've understood questions that they shouldn't understand. So the questions have involved the area of the brain that they need to understand the question, but they've understood it on an intuitive level or on a level other than the brain function. So that's quite interesting. I do believe that the higher self, so I talked about being in the most stable state and connecting to our higher self. So our higher self is when we're still. It's when we meditate or journal, when we're still. So it's not listening to others' opinions, it's not Googling everything, it's being quiet in yourself and trusting that feeling of what you need to do. So that could be making a big decision or a small decision. Ideally, you'd use this to make small decisions, so bigger decisions are easier. And you do get better with practice, but you trust yourself, you know. And even that saying, sleep on it, that's when you have memory consolidation and you... people often have quite psychic insight when they dream because our analytical mind is switched off and our brain is... or our soul is more receptive to connection from spirit. So if you're someone who has quite psychic dreams and amazing insight when you dream, then it's quite possible that during the day you're overthinking things. So just take that back and connect to your higher self. And by that I'm not trying to be rude, I just want you to have a think about this in your own energy, in your own life. Reincarnation is fascinating. There's a lot of interesting, particularly YouTube. I think I spent about a day on YouTube looking at reincarnation. I thought, don't need to do that. But, you know, it makes you question, is it just a random pattern? Is there a soul purpose? Is it related to soul contracts of things that we need to do? Do we come back to learn a specific lesson? And I've had a handful of really interesting readings over the years where one man, for example, found a book in a library and he said, I was really drawn to this book, and I knew that he'd written it in a past life. And it was, sort of random things like that where I know that, might be in a different language or a different subject matter that they've worked in. So there's similarities I see that I can't be explained, and there's things occasionally that pop up in readings that just can't be explained. But yeah, it is interesting. Certainly in my life, I believe I've played different roles in my family to be the wise one in my family. I've done unpopular things, but I've done what needed to be done to achieve the least perverse outcome for the most vulnerable person. So in altered states of consciousness, we have obviously the sleep, the non-REM and REM. There's other things like there's seizures, there's meditations. There's no logic thought, but we have an ability to perceive sounds, smells, tastes. We see things. Some people dream in different languages. So that's really interesting, whether that's a past life remnant. Sometimes they don't speak that language in this life, but they have a dreaming. I've woken up patients for sleep studies, actually it's happened twice, and have spoken to me in Latin. And I said, oh, you've learnt Latin at school? No, I haven't. But they weren't aware of that. So it's really interesting. Even near-death experience, there's a separation of the soul and brain function, but they perceive sounds, smells, yet their brain, their physical body is not there. Their soul is elsewhere. So, it makes you think if your physical body is not there, you've been able to perceive physical senses. I have a blind friend who is clairvoyant. He has a knack for politics. He'll say, Rhonda, I see this happening in America, and he predicts every election, but he actually uses that language, I see. So even though you get older and your senses change, you may still have strong clairvoyance or clairaudience. And even the placebo effect is interesting as well. But also looking at free will, there's not a change in chemicals of the brain from what I've read, yet people make a decision based on their will. So that's interesting as well. Just going back to talk about my altered state of consciousness. I showed some family photos. I had quite a yuck childhood. I grew up in a family of, I was the youngest of 7. I grew up in Melbourne. There was a lot of substance abuse, domestic violence, and as a child I thought that was normal. I just thought that's what happens in life. For me, being quite psychic, it's interesting. Some people look at psychic ability and think there's a correlation. If you've had adversity in your childhood, you're more psychic. And I do believe that. I believe that kids who have it tough learn to trust their intuition. But I've also met spiritual practitioners that are amazing, and they've had great families and great childhood, and they've had parental support and things I haven't had. So it's not a black and white thing. I believe it helps, but it's not essential. So I had an altered state of consciousness when I was about 10. So it was around the time my mediumship changed. So I was aware I was psychic. I had a knowing when there was a car accident, when the school teacher's husband died. I just knew things. I was aware of my mediumship when my grandfather died. So he came into my room, and we grew up in Clayton, a suburb southeast of Melbourne, and my grandparents lived closer to the city, and we always visited them. They never visited us. And one day I was just sitting on my bed reading. I'm the nerd. And my granddad was suddenly there. And I said, what are you doing here, Granddad? You don't visit us. And you didn't open the door, the curious thing. And he said, Rhonda, it's okay. I'm not cold anymore. I'm okay. And he was old, he was grey, but he looked, and he started, because my grandparents lived till their 90s, but he was starting to look more weathered. He sort of, in his last couple of years of life, he looked older. And I just couldn't get over his energy. His face looked young. He was smiling. He was happy. He was pain-free. He was breathing well. And he basically said, Rhonda, I'm okay. I'm going away. I'm not cold anymore. I love you. Tell Mum I love her. Give her a hug. So it's my mum's dad. And that was when I was aware of my mediumship. So around that time, I also had a sensory change where I basically, I was in the kitchen at home, and there were a lot of arguments between my older brothers. They were drunk, they were stoned, it was just awful. And the thing that frustrated me the most was I felt unsafe, and it was just noisy. And I sat under the kitchen table, and my reasoning for that was that if there's a fight, no one's going to fall on me. If something's thrown, nothing's going to hit me. So I decided to sit under the table. And all of a sudden, I was aware of someone in front of me. It's my main guide, Charles. He was sitting in front of me. And I felt safe. I had a warmth. I just had a trust. I had a knowing. No one else could see him. No one else had noticed that I was there. It was like we were in a bubble, a cocoon of safety. And he basically, that's my reason for the tree branch on the side. He showed me permutations of my life based on choices I could make. Basically gave me power to make decisions in my life. So I was still in primary school, I was a child, but I just felt a sense of just calmness and safety. He showed me travelling the world. I've been to about 90 countries, showed me going to university. He also showed me rocking in a corner if I decide to play the victim. So he showed me quite a lot, and I decided, I made decisions, life decisions, even what I wanted in a relationship. Took me a long time to find that. I met my husband at 39, but it was worth the wait. So that's, it gave me, it's almost the only thing I can find online or in books similar to or describing my experience is a pre-life experience, being shown permutations of your life and decisions you could make. So that was my altered state of consciousness. I could see, I could smell, I could, I could hear what he was saying, but my sensory had changed, my sensory perception had changed in that it was suddenly quiet. So that was really interesting. That was describing my sort of, not glimpse in the afterlife. It wasn't a near-death experience. It wasn't a medical event, but it was an altered state of consciousness that really helped me to trust my intuition and really change the direction of my life. Okay, so just going on to mediumship. I've only got about 10 minutes, but I'll open it up to question and answer and mediumship. When I do mediumship, so when I connect with spirit, I have an immense feeling of warmth when I feel love. It's really helped me with my loss and grief. There are some of my loved ones on that slide, my parents and grandparents, my best friend that gave me away at my wedding, my parents, and then my brother on the right. There's no time and space in heaven. They don't really care about the things we worry about, and they often confirm that in readings. I believe also that spirit passes the baton to a family member that can use those gifts. So, for example, my dad died 30 years ago. My mediumship then changed, and I didn't really correlate that with his death, but he's also told me from spirit that he was a medium. And he really struggled with that. It scared him, it frustrated him, but he's passed that baton. My mum died 2 years ago. My clairvoyance has changed. I'm also getting a lot more past life in my readings, which is interesting. I don't do a past life regression as such, but I know she was incredibly psychic. Not sure she was a medium, but incredibly psychic. And I've also had clarity. I feel like I'm a reincarnation of my father's great-grandfather. I've had clarity of that, which is really interesting. Beautiful. All right, so I will open it to question and answers and hopefully do some readings as well. I don't have much time, but thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to put your hand up if you have a question. Yes? Could you turn the audience mic on, please? Number 3.
Hello. Oh, hi.
Hi.
I was just
you have a voice.
Yes. I was just wondering, when you have a person coming for a reading and say that you see something particularly negative or whatnot, how do you handle delivering that message with care, or what you decide to reveal to the person?
Great question. So the question was, if I pick up on something negative, how do I handle that during a reading? I feel that I have a duty of care to to pass on that message. I always do a prayer and meditation and ground myself and welcome in anything aligned to unconditional love. So I make sure my connection is pure. It has happened. I've picked up on medical things. With medical things, I get clairgustance and clarifaction. I get taste and smell a lot with medical intuition readings. I will say, go to your doctor. Or if I pick up on a legal issue, go to your lawyer. If I see something like someone being run over, I'll say, your son needs to take care crossing the road, not listen to his music so loud, that sort of thing. And if they're blasé about it, I'll say it more forcefully. I deliver messages the way I would like to hear them, and I'm direct, I'm straightforward. Not everyone is as straightforward as me, but I believe I have a duty of care to deliver that message. I don't normally get a lot of bad things. I really don't. I mean, some people, and often it can come up in, say, career readings. People say, I've quit my work, and I think, oh, no, you shouldn't have done that. But then that's too empowering of what are your choices? How do other people see you at work? What are you doing? That sort of thing. Does that answer your question? Beautiful, thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes?
Thanks for your talk. It was really interesting.
Thank you. If you can just hold it closer.
I'm just wondering if it's the same sort of thing if we wanted to do a reading. If you wanted to speak to someone who has passed, do they come to you if you ask them to?
Yeah, absolutely. I have had people ask me for a general reading, a general psychic reading, and then someone stepped in. They have the same personality in spirit as they do here. So if someone's very shy, they might not come through. If someone's, hey, look at me, I'll probably come through. If someone's, focused on one particular thing, they'll show you me, they fixed motorcycles for a living or they built train kits. They'll show me that as evidence of survival. With mediumship, it's often a very quick thought or a quick feeling. We often have received information so quickly we dismiss it. So it's important to do that. So whether you want to jot it down or whether you want to text yourself or do something like that. But I actually do believe that you've got mediumship. It's sort of, but you kind of laugh about it. There's something really funny about and my ears are ringing and you have smells and you have hearing. So I feel like you have mediumship connection from spirit. You hear it. And you smell people as well. Not trying to say you smell dead people, but you have a smelling of cigarette smoke if they smoked or that sort of thing. So something interesting about that. Yeah, so it's very quick, and it's once you have that connection, you take it back to clairsentience, the feeling, and you feel into it. So again, if you overthink it, then they'll probably get bored and go away. It's really going back to the feeling. So for you be still, connect with your higher self and take it back that feeling to maintain the connection. And ask for specifics. So you can say, okay, so you've given me that smell and I can hear you, but show me something. Or you might have, for example, show me a white butterfly if you want to show me this, that sort of thing. When you are reading books on spirituality and psychic development, one of my teachers and mentors is Florence King. Her books are amazing. Her last book in particular, she talks about psychic development and that sort of thing. She's got a stand here. When you're looking at what things mean, so if you get birds, if you get insects, you get a lot of insects, by the way. Whatever you're getting, that has to have a meaning for you. So that's important to keep your own journal of what that means. If you have a teacher or you read a book that says this only means this, that's nonsense because it might mean something different for you. And I've read books and I've thought, well, I get that information and they're saying that I can't, but that's how I do it. So you've got to do things in your own way and do things differently. To be a spiritual reader, you've got to be strong and you've got to be sensitive. It's a bit of a tough industry, some interesting people in the industry, but you've also got to be sensitive enough to receive the information. So just because you have psychic ability and mediumship doesn't mean you have to do this. You can use intuition in your daily life in hiring and firing people, in relationships. You go on a date and think, he looks like a heartbreaker, then he'll break your heart, kind of thing. Does that make sense? Beautiful. Do we have another question up there? And when you go to a psychic, think of questions you don't know the answer to. So really, really test your connection to your guides and help you connect with your guides.
Hi, thank you. Oh, well, thank you so much for your talk. I had a question come through about the idea of when you want to connect with people you knew or people that you've been told about, like your mum's dad or something, I guess that might be easier. But what about when you're wanting to connect with ancestors or people that you don't actually truly even know have existed? What is it different, or how does it differ?
It's not really different. The only different, it's connecting in the same way. And I do have, that comes up in readings. And it's interesting. Usually the sitter is doing genealogy, is doing family research, there's been a spelling mistake or something like that. So that's interesting. It's connecting in the same way. What is different is that the further apart the person is to you, the less able to validate the evidence of survival of the soul. So there's then hearsay of, my lawyers speak, there's hearsay of what you've been told about the person, but you can't physically validate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm even thinking more so from like ancient time.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of validate or understand? Is it just more a knowing or a feeling?
For me, it's the knowing and the feeling. I actually did a reading during the week where I got a alien life form, and it was an octopus. And I said, this is going to sound ridiculous, but this is what I'm being shown. But that made sense to her. So I'm just the messenger. So you can have, your higher self is then, collecting to consciousness, and that could be galactic consciousness as well. I don't believe that we're the only life form in the universe. That's a pretty big space just for us. I believe that there's other life forms on other planets. And I also believe that we are not meant to know. We're not going to find out. Is that what you're getting to? You're getting to, yeah. And there is, I did actually have a reading in New Zealand, because I travel. I've been to the US, New Zealand and Malaysia, Singapore doing readings. I did a reading of a lady that did Maori astrology. No, it wasn't called astrology. It was sort of like a Maori naming astrology, what your star sign name is. And that was a bit out there, but it was interesting. Not my cup of tea. I'm not going to focus that in my readings, but I also like to learn and experience.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Oh, can we just do one more? Well, he just had his hand. Sorry. This is the last question.
Yeah, hey, was there ever a conflict between your science and your spirituality?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know from my own experience, a scientific mindset can block your psychic stuff completely.
Absolutely.
Almost if you grow up as a hardcore scientific practitioner.
I didn't grow up in a hardcore scientific family. It's unusual for me to have finished school and gone to university. So that's my first thing. I can overthink things, and that used to affect my ability to do mediumship on stage. I've let that go. I just have to still and quiet my mind. As I said, it's a healthy degree of skepticism. If I hear something that sounds and feels off, I'll ask questions, and if they can't understand that, then I don't do business with that person. So I have that skepticism, and I encourage everyone to be the same. Yeah, but I just don't, it doesn't conflict. The only thing that conflicted me is when I started this business, I thought, well, hang on a minute, I've spent all that money and all those years at university, and I haven't studied at university to do this. Is this a bit ridiculous? So yes and no, but I'm getting better. Thank you so much.